how do we define ADHD? Because so far I have been talking about ADHD, but I have not told you how we define ADHD. So basically, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is defined by three core symptoms. We call them core because they are really the defining problems, the defining symptoms of the disorder. The first one is inattention, so difficulty orienting attention, sustaining attention, maintaining attention, and the ability of not being distracted by external stimuli when focusing on an activity. Then there is impulsivity or impulsiveness, which is basically the tendency to do things very quickly, abruptly, without thinking of the consequences. And then there is hyperactivity, which can be physical, so moving a lot, much more than the average expected by age, by developmental age. But especially in adults, it can be more a kind of mental hyperactivity. So thinking a lot, doing a lot of things at the same time, jumping from one thing to another. Now, these are, as I mentioned, the defining characteristics of ADHD, but there are two other problems that even if they are not part of the definition of ADHD, they are quite commonly associated with ADHD. So not every child with ADHD has these characteristics, but they are quite common. And these are oppositional defiant behavior, and the second is emotional lability, so difficulties in regulating emotions, and which can lead to tantrums, anger, and mood fluctuations quite quickly during the day. Now, I would like to highlight the fact that the term attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is probably not the most accurate we can think of for this condition. There are actually a number of issues with this definition. So the first is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are three characteristics, but the term ADHD does not include impulsivity, which can be a very important problem for a number of these children and even adults. The second is that the term deficit would induce to think that these children are not able to focus, are not able to regulate, to control their behavior and their reactions. So this is not the case. It's not a total deficit of something. Actually, children with ADHD can focus on some activities, can control their behavior, and of course it goes without saying that sometimes children without ADHD can't focus. So what is the characteristic of ADHD? The fact that actually they can focus their attention only when there is a high level of reward, of interest for them. So actually they can pay attention and be perfectly fine on activities which are highly rewarding, highly novel and interesting for them. Video games is a typical example because things go quite quickly in a video game. Why they can pay attention on things which are quite boring, repetitive, standard, typically going to school and pay attention to a lesson. So I would like really to highlight this issue because it's important when it comes to the diagnosis of ADHD.